I oftentimes say on these shows that as much as the mainstream media is bad, I wouldn't necessarily say they lie. They mostly really omit important information. But when it comes to the recent story by New York Times, or specifically the photo that was on the front page of New York Times, people might have seen it. It's on a thumbnail. It's basically a woman carrying a baby, and the baby is assumed to be basically starving. It's like super like thin. You can like basically almost like bones and skin that basically really doesn't have much. Now this and this photo has then been shared by pretty much every media, and the main point was look at Gaza child that is starving because of Israel was always the implication. Now, as it turns out, as we've seen already with many of the sort of previous pictures of starving babies, is that this baby is not starving. This baby has a disease that is causing it to lose its weight. This story has been broken, and now New York Times has apologized for this. We'll take a look at that apology. We'll cover this story in full. Welcome to the Daily Objective. Joining me today is James Valiant. And James, so yeah, just maybe just a little bit more about it. So this photo was taken by a Gazan journalist, Ahmad Al-Arini, and it appeared in pretty much every sort of mainstream media. With the main thing that was reported was that the weight of the child dropped from 9 kilograms to 6 kilograms, so it lost about 7 pounds, which is half the norm for a child at that age. And this was attributed to the lack of humanitarian aid. And this photo was taken on July 21st, just to say that.
Yeah.
James, any opening thoughts?
Well, I understand she had another small child who showed no signs of malnutrition, and that is a wider context. And there's a lesson here. There's Leonard Peacock. I would refer people to Leonard Peacock's brilliant essay, "A Picture is Not an Argument," because a photo really doesn't tell you. They say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, you know, that is true in one sense. One word, though, is worth limitless numbers of pictures. The reverse, I would ask people to really think about very intensely here. A picture does not explain itself. A picture does not put itself in context. A picture doesn't give you the wider overarching story. And the wider overarching story, you saying that the media has outright lied, at least most of the time, well, they spread what have been proven to be lies, lies coming straight from Hamas, lies coming straight from the haters of Israel. And they spread these lies as if they're true. And in doing so, it's not just that they're lying, they're actually engaged in helping Hamas in their propaganda strategy. Hamas, since the beginning, I mean, why would you put in hospitals and schools, in residential areas? Why would you put your hostages there? Why would you put your military caches of weapons there? Why would you have the entrances to your tunnels like Hamas does there? They are explicitly trying to kill their own women and children, their babies, as a PR maneuver. And the West, they would not be enabled to do that if Western media did not play into just that. So when we see this happening, we're seeing Western media participating in the very strategy of Hamas. They are engaged in pro Hamas international strategy, PR. There's no other way of looking at it. They were taken in how many lies? The hospital bombing, the statistics. They cut their numbers in half on the number of casualties themselves. They cut the number in half. And, okay, why are they? We know they are lying. We know they're exaggerating. We know they're making stuff up. We know certain facts, and yet the media is. You're right. This got picked up all over the English speaking world. I saw every major media outlet had it on it. And so, what's the deal there? The media is actively engaged in helping Hamas execute its strategy for PR, using their ruthlessly using their own babies as human shields and PR tools. And when the media does that, what they're doing is they're feeding right into the Hamas strategy. It wouldn't work. Hamas strategy could not work but for Western media engaged in this kind of visual deception. Uh, uh, I mean, in fact, Israel is doing something unprecedented in the history of warfare, feeding the enemy, trying to find a way to get more aid in, because guess what? There hasn't been a starvation crisis in Gaza. Why? Because of Israel, because of the United States. It is absolutely astonishing to me. That ought not to be, by the way, Israel's strategy. But even leaving that aside, when Western media does this, they're playing straight into Hamas's strategy. They are pro-Hamas when they do this. Now they'll give a correction, but the correction will be on this little, website way over here that only gets a few thousand views. When the New York Times, which has all these subscribers, worldwide subscribers, the picture gets promoted, shouted from the rooftops, and the correction goes way back here, and no one really basically even notices it, except people like us who've been noting the lie after lie after lie coming from Hamas that the Western media, the New York Times and the BBC, will just pick up on and repeat, and then they'll have a little thing. This comes from the, Gazan Health Ministry, i.e. Hamas, i.e. Hamas, the perpetrators of October 7th. So if Israel's enemies target civilians, okay, there's nothing, and that's part of their explicit strategy when it comes to Israelis and killing Jews. Okay, that's not focused on as genocidal. Israel, which is engaged in feeding the enemy population, is accused of being genocidal. So they have to drop a gigantic factual context. One photograph is certainly not an argument. You have to put it into the wider context of the facts that we know to be true. Facts, frankly, I'm not happy about Israel and America's policy in this regard. But even assuming that they ignore that, in order to redefine, in effect, what genocide is anyway, so they can accuse Israel of genocide, it is politically motivated deception. You're absolutely right. It's not only deception, it's not only over lying. When you hear the wider context, the woman has another small child that there's no signs of malnutrition. Okay. They are dropping the factual context to make a lie, no question about it. But it's more than that. They are actively engaged in helping Hamas with its strategy against Israel. Without them, Hamas's strategy would not work. They know Hamas, anyone who is aware of the facts on the ground knows what Hamas's strategy is in using their babies as human shields and as PR tools. And yet, nonetheless, they go forth and engage in, they're worse than useful idiots for Hamas. They are actively engaged in Hamas propaganda. That's all you can say. In that context, it's overwhelmingly obvious that they're engaged in overtly helping Hamas.
There's a few things I want to comment in the chat, but first on what you've said, I mean, it's absolutely right. The amount of we'll go to it in a bit later. Sorry, let me read a few things from the chat first. First, somebody says, talking about Jewish propaganda, how the Jews control the media, and again, like this came out from New York Times. The editor of New York Times is Jewish. So again, trying to say that this is some kind of or that the Jews are controlling the world, yet that they are not able to even stop this type of propaganda to come out against itself is again ridiculous. Somebody says Israel is losing the public opinion war. Again, the fact is that if you are truly evil, then you can do whatever you want. China can do whatever it wants, Russia can do whatever it wants, and nobody gives this amount of attention. I'll give a little bit of spoiler to the reality show that's upcoming. And it's gonna start as a question for you, James. So there is a UN meeting right now, and there was a protest there. It was a protest against Saudi foreign minister. James, what would you guess it was about? Maybe about the human rights abuses by Saudi Arabia.
Exactly.
Maybe,
Free speech
maybe,
in Saudi Arabia, the way women are
yeah,
treated in Saudi Arabia,
maybe, yeah,
something like that.
maybe free speech, maybe the lack of democracy, maybe the fact that Saudi
Ah,
Arabia is one of the only absolute dictatorship, absolute monarchies still existing. No, it was because Saudi Arabia is complicit in Israeli genocide. That's what they were protesting. So again, every single issue is about Israel. Every single thing that's going on is about Israel. The idea that Israel is being targeted because, like, again, what you have to realize, you for that to make sense, you have to think that what Israel is doing is worse than what China is doing to the Uyghurs, what China is doing to its own citizens, for that matter, what North Korea is doing to its own citizens, what Russia is doing to its own citizens, and Ukrainians. Every civil war, every single genocide that's going on around the world, and all of that combined is still more okay than what Israel is doing. I mean, if you are holding these two things at the same time, you are this. It's straight up evasion. You are ignoring reality. You do have prejudice against the Jews, and you want to focus on that part. Uh, do you want to
Yeah.
go to the New York Times response, or do you want to add
Yeah,
something
let's go to
first?
the New York Times response. You said it so well. I mean, there's political violence going on in Africa, South America. There's oppression going on in a slave state like North Korea or the theocracy of Iran. And what do they focus on? Every time, Israel, which is just a bastion of civilization compared to those countries, compared to what's going on elsewhere. And what do they focus on? Israel's got to be the bad guy by implication. This was picked up by the BBC and every media outlet practically in the English speaking world, from what I could discern. And yet the correction, as I say, goes way down over here in the little page that has only a few thousand views and subscribers. It's just ridiculous. When you're the goddamn New York Times, the biggest voice in the media in the English speaking world, at least perhaps the most respected one. So it's insane. It ought not to be respected. It's absolutely a lying yellow paper and doesn't deserve the reputation that it, say once had 90 years ago when Henry Hazlitt was its financial editor. I can tell you that.
So this is the response from the New York Times. This was posted on X. We have appended on an editor's note to a story about Mohammed Zakaria al-Mutawak, a child in Gaza who was diagnosed with severe malnutrition. After publication, the Times learned that he also had pre-existing health problems. Read more below. Quote, children in Gaza are malnourished and starving, as New York Times reporters and others have documented. We recently ran a story about Gaza's most vulnerable civilians, including Mohammed Zakaria al-Mutawa, who is about 18 months old and suffers from severe malnutrition. We have since learned new information, including from the hospital that treated him and his medical records, and have updated the story to add context about his pre-existing health problems. This additional detail gives readers a greater understanding of his situation. Our reporters and photographers continue to report from Gaza bravely, sensitively, and at personal risk, so that readers can firsthand see the consequences of the war. This was a spokesperson for the New York Times. So, few comments on this. This doesn't add more context to the story. It changes this whole story. The whole thing was about the starvation of Gazan children. This, and you posted a picture that the main cause of him being the way he is not starvation, it's his disease. It completely changes it. Not to mention the fact that this was posted on the New York Times PR, or New York Times Communications part of X, which the difference between New York Times account, which has 55 million followers, and this one, which has 90,000. Again, even posting the retraction, and even posting the retraction doesn't matter because this story is already out there. The fact that this was published is already out there. So, yeah, I mean, James, any comments?
Well, you think they could have, I mean, this is a horrible situation. I feel very sorry for the baby. The baby is totally innocent. It has a horrible disease. But if you have to pick a baby with a horrible disease for your, you know, evidence, then you begin to wonder about the truth of the story. Can't you find starving children? Can't you find me more than one picture of an actually a child or a toddler baby that's suffering from malnutrition? But even that is not put into proper, even if you could do that. But notice what they have to do that. That's the picture here. They don't have pictures. I can only presume the logic actually would be from the picture that they don't have pictures, a bunch of pictures with babies down to bones, starvation. So they have to lie to us through this visual. Now, wait a minute. Even if there were starvation in Gaza, whose fault would it be? It would be Hamas's. They're still holding hostages. They've been fighting tooth and nail for quite some time. So wait a minute here. They were the ones who aggressively attacked on October 7th. If there were starving babies in Gaza, whose fault would that be? That is the important context that something like the New York Times needs to provide. Of course, this war has happened because of, and therefore the aggressors have to expect that, something like that. And say, even if they want to save that for their editorials, for their editorial policy. But for God's sake, when it comes to the factual, straight up factual journalism, where are the pictures of these starving babies? So it's just like lie upon lie upon lie, and then twisted context. Even if you could find such pictures, and now I doubt that you have any such pictures at all because you have to use a diseased child to do this. Now I have to wonder, not only you're actually engaged in Hamas propaganda, you're actively helping Hamas because you're not giving the wider context that the aggressor is responsible when they're suffering as a result of the war that results from their aggression. Okay, if they're the aggressor and they're suffering in their own country, it is their own government, Hamas, that is responsible for any of that suffering. But now you have to wonder, since they could only find a diseased baby, whether or not there are any malnourished babies at all in Gaza. And if there are, then think about it. You have defeated your purpose and then some, New York Times. You destroy your credibility. You don't show, you allow people to actually think to themselves, if they are on the ball, New York Times is just lying to us. So even if there were starving babies, what you're doing is not helping their cause when you lie like this. And when you put the retraction like that, listen to that. It wasn't even much of a retraction. They are still convinced, as they're posting the retraction, oh, well, there's a broader context to the medical records. We spoke to the doctors, and therefore we're sure that this baby had a disease. Okay, that's helpful, I suppose, but it does definitely undermine your credibility. But but nonetheless, what the hell are you doing when you're saying in the retraction itself, look, we know it's existing. This just isn't a picture of it. Well, where is the picture of it? I know your reporters are out there bravely covering the suffering of Gazans. Whose fault is that? Where are the real pictures of that? No, but they're still convinced that there's widespread starvation as Israel is attempting to feed the enemy. Yeah, okay, Hamas or groups of people are maybe trying to get at the aid that's coming in. But wait a minute, again, whose fault is that? Israel for delivering food to the area where the people are? It is Hamas propaganda. They are aiding actively and knowingly aiding Hamas, even in the retraction.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in the retraction itself, it says at the end, we wanted to show the consequences of the war. But again, that's not putting things into context. We see who is paying the consequences of the war, but what perpetuates this war? What makes this war go on? And pretty much the world is united that this is all on Israel, right? This is what we'll also talk about on the reality show, that every single thing since October 7th, for that matter, this has been put on Israel. It has been put on Israel to agree to a ceasefire, to not go into Gaza originally, to not go into Rafah, then to not continue further, to let aid in. They wanted this war to go like, and sort of both things, right? They either want this conflict to go on forever because they do not see Palestinians for what they are. When they look at Palestinians, they see some kind of people who just want peace, who cannot wait to have elections, who cannot wait to elect like a Western style democracy. And if you see Palestinians as that, you're never going to achieve anything, because every time you have to deal with things as they are. Like, you cannot imagine, like, if Palestinians were peaceful, then yeah, you go for peace. Well, no, you don't need to go for peace. If they were peaceful, there is no need to actually go for peace. But
Wouldn't be the situation.
but if they are the enemies of yours, if they're actively trying to wipe you out, what will you achieve by giving them something? It's like somebody is trying to stab you, and you give them a gun to hope,
Right.
oh, maybe they'll stop now. Maybe they'll like me enough to actually not do anything. This is
They'll
exactly
know
what.
that they'll know that I'm on their side. Just give them a gun. Yeah, it's not a bad analogy, actually. No, but they know perfectly well what Hamas's strategy is. They know how they're helping Hamas's strategy. They know that they're throwing a lifeline to Hamas in doing this. It's not merely a lie, it's a lie they know that is part of Hamas' strategy. They are. I cannot any longer believe that this is some kind of muddle-headed in between. You know, someone was saying before how Israel was losing the PR war. Well, yeah, when you're a bigot and you approach everything with the bigoted stereotypes of a extreme Islamist, of course they're going to lose the PR war because they're
Yeah,
playing it.
I'm sure the Jews in the 30s in Germany were using the PR, losing the
Yeah,
PR war.
exactly. Goebbels was winning the PR war in Nazi Germany. Okay, wow. Yeah, because we all know Jews are hateful, awful, greedy, whatever, Christ killers in the Christian context. And so therefore, Jews are losing the PR war in Nazi Germany. Uh-huh, that's right. In a similar way, the UN and Western media is making it inevitable, in effect, that the Jews will lose the PR war in certain quarters using their bigoted, bigoted. And I mean, I now, again, looking at the Western world today, I see the rise of an ugly anti Semitism that I thought was dying out. But no, it isn't. Based on that bigotry, the anti Semitism that really still exists throughout the world, that's why and how they're winning a PR war. They're winning a PR war among bigots.
This sort of retraction from the New York Times also warranted a response from Naftali Bennett, the former prime minister of Israel, and I mean, depending on how the election goes, maybe future prime minister of Israel. Not that it would be much better than Netanyahu, or if even better. He said, "This is simply unbelievable. After generating a tsunami of hate towards Israel with a terrifying picture, the New York Times now quietly admits that the boy has pre-existing conditions. New York Times, you knew that Hamas uses babies with pre-existing illnesses. We've been saying this for months now. You knew exactly what this picture would cause. This is Blood-Libel in 2025. Have you no shame?" And exactly, at the same time, you have these two stories. You have the story that Israel doesn't allow journalists into Gaza. We don't know what's going on. We have no idea what's going on. And oh, here is a picture from a journalist we have in Gaza, and it tells you exactly what you need to know. It's not propaganda. It's not lies. You can trust it. And they try to have their cake and eat it too. But when your goal is propaganda against the Jewish state, then yeah, it doesn't matter. Like once you accept irrationality, once you accept bigotry, then yeah, reality is just that's not really an obstacle anymore. You can just do whatever.
Right. And of course, the people who engage in anti-Semitic violence or vandalism and so forth are the ones responsible. But what do you think? You think New York Times, you're going to help people from U.S. Embassy workers from the Israeli U.S. Embassy in Washington, D.C. not get more frequently shot? Or do you think you'll make it more likely that they will get shot? Or do you think it's more likely that Jews will get thrown into the cold canals of Amsterdam? Or do you think it'll make it less likely that Jews will get thrown into the cold canals of Amsterdam? I mean, think about it. Given the rise in worldwide anti-Semitism, this is extremely irresponsible because, of course, they're not the perps of the violence. On the other hand, are they, all other things being equal, are they encouraging that kind of bigoted hatred, that violent hatred against Jewish people, or are they helping? New York Times, come on, be
Somebody is
responsible.
asking, Somebody's asking if I'm unable to have empathy. I have empathy for every single Palestinian who wants to stand up to Hamas and end the slaughter of Jews and establish a free state. Show me them and I'll have empathy for them. But what I see when it comes to the Palestinian people, well, of course, children are innocent. That sort of
Yeah, but
goes
if
by
you
default.
raise your children,
Yeah.
if I have empathy for the children, it's the parents that I'm most concerned about. If you raise your children as Palestinians raise their children, we've seen the UNRWA propaganda educational films they watch. It's a wonderful thing to martyr yourself, to kill yourself in the cause of killing Jews. October 7th was just a glorious day for Palestinians and Islam. Now, if you raise your children that way, if you use them as human shields, if you use hospitals and schools and homes for your military purposes, if you don't wear uniforms so that we can distinguish between civilian and military targets, then it is not, of course, I have empathy for the babies. I have empathy for the children. But the focus of my concern is not on Israel fighting for its own security and in the wake of October 7th. It's on the parents of those children, the adults who are educating those children. Those are the truly evil monsters who do not have empathy. They are they'll shoot at you and then they'll hold up their own baby as a human shield. In effect, that's what they're doing. Who do you blame? The person who's trying to survive and shooting back, or the parent who's holding up their own baby as a human shield, the educator who's holding up their own baby as a human shield? Hamas can be protecting its children rather than using them for strategic purposes in a war. If you have, to the extent that you have empathy for these babies and children, your ire, your anger should be focused on their parents and educators and the culture that uses babies as human shields, not on Israel, which is trying to feed the area, warns people to get out before they bomb buildings. Was there any such warning on October 7th? Did Iran give warning, before they attack civilian targets in Israel with their missile barrages? No. This is absolute perversity. To the extent you have empathy for the victim, you should find the real perpetrator of their harm, and not put it somewhere else. I mean, if you blame someone who's innocent for the harm of those babies, you're not helping those babies. You're not having, in effect, real empathy for those children. If there are hungry children in Gaza, it is Hamas's fault, and your anger should be directed at Hamas, not Israel. Completely and fully. Hamas is using those babies as strategy, and the New York Times is playing into that very strategy. It is precisely empathy for these babies that gets me upset. They're misidentifying the people who are perpetrating the harm, that insofar as there is civilian harm going on in Gaza, they're misidentifying the villain. I mean, my God, if you say, well, no, Hitler is the hero, and the Allies in the West were the bad guys, and because of that, you don't have empathy for the victims at Auschwitz and Dachau, you've got it all upside down, inside out, and backwards, okay? Empathy for victims means you identify the perp, as we call it in American law enforcement, the actual wrongdoers here who are causing any such harm. And they've got it completely backwards. Do you, questioner, have any empathy for these children?
We have to start wrapping up, but somebody says the people, meaning the Palestinians, are the hostages. Well, this kind of thing leads into dictatorship, into perpetual dictatorship. I'm sure happy that the American revolutionaries weren't felt like, oh, we are just hostages. I'm sure glad that people in my own country, the people that overthrew the communist regime, didn't just think they are the hostages of the regime, but decided to say, no, we actually have a choice over what kind of government we want, and we will stand up to it. So if Palestinians want something better, they need to stand up. They cannot expect somebody else to come and give them freedom. Freedom is earned, and freedom has to be understood and recognized. The Palestinians do not want it. If they wanted to, they would do something. But they instead would rather either starve, possibly, or live under Hamas dictatorship in perpetuity. Because again, they were happy to live under Hamas for the last 20 years. And now they are calling for it because Hamas went a bit too far for, not when it comes to what they would like for Hamas to wipe out Israel, but they didn't manage to. So Palestinians now want some different kind of dictatorship, but they do not want the end of the slaughter against Israelis.
Yeah.
James,
Think
any
of,
last thoughts?
yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. In World War II, think of the French resistance. Think of the Germans who were trying to, that takes some courage to do when, when the Nazi troops are in your country, like in France, or when the Nazis are in power over your country, like in Germany. Think of the courage it took for them to fight the Nazis. My God. And you're right, the American revolutionaries, what makes them heroes is that they, give me liberty or give me death. They were moral agents who fought for their own individual rights. And this is what we need to see from the Palestinians. The Palestinian culture is itself the problem, insofar as it doesn't cause people. If there were starving babies, wouldn't every responsible parent in Gaza be standing up right now and fighting Hamas and saying, no, we want to live at peace with Israel. Here are the hostages. No, but you don't see that, do you? You don't see the equivalent of the French resistance during World War II, when northern France was completely occupied by, German troops. I mean, come on. It's mind-blowing how they misdirect the blame here all on Israel, and that's got to be anti-Semitism because you're absolutely blind to the wider context of facts. I will repeat again.
Absolutely. We have a super chat from Wes. I'm not sure if I thanked him, so if I didn't, thank you again. We have the reality show coming up. We'll talk about the United Nations calls for the destruction of Israel. So make sure to join us for that. And of course, the irreplaceable Spark conference. We still have tickets on sale, the premium and VIP tickets. ARCUK VIP and ARCUK Premium are the codes you can use. So check out objectivism.co.uk to both either purchase the tickets or find out more about the conference to hopefully convince you to come. James will be one of the people you'll be able to find at the conference. So again, the Irreplaceable Spark Conference, objectivism.co.uk, and the reality show is coming up in just about a minute or so, so join us there. Thank you, James, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and bye-bye.
Be safe.